In my early teen years, I was quite sort of late childhood, early teen years. I became quite fashion conscious for a while, and I started to care about what I look like, as I guess many girls do at that age. They become more aware of fashion and all that sort of thing. So I started to wear makeup, too much makeup, it has to be said. I didn't know how to apply it properly, so I ended up looking a bit like a tart because I put way too much blusher on. But I did care about how I looked. I spent a lot of time over my appearance, putting glitter on my hair, reading celebrity magazines, reading magazines like Closer and J17 and all the other teen magazines. Jump was a particular favourite. Spent a lot of time putting clips in my hair and all the rest. So, I was as far from the stereotype of the autistic person who doesn't care about how they come across as you can get, really. That's the point I want to emphasise. But when it became more apparent, when I became more aware of my social deficiencies, I stopped caring. I became a bit of a recluse, really. I didn't really interact with other people at all. Also, but at the same time, I still had this desire for social reaction. So often when I was at school, I would behave in a very inappropriate way around other kids. I do stupid things like, stick my tongue out and other things that were very, very inappropriate that I don't feel comfortable talking about on video. But suffice to say, I was very inappropriate, and I still didn't really understand that other kids had feelings. But gradually, towards the end of my teen years, there was a dawning recognition and awakening that other people do have feelings. And when I became aware that other people do have feelings, I also became more aware of my own deficiencies. I became more self-aware. And I became more aware that actually I lacked this elusive empathy. And I became... And this troubled me. I started to think, there must be something wrong with me. I didn't know what, because, as I said, at this point in time, I didn't yet have a diagnosis. I wasn't diagnosed with Asperger's till I was 21, which I'll talk about in another video. But I became more aware of my social deficiencies, and I was thinking to myself, why can't I make friends? What's wrong with me? I mean, making friends should be so easy. Is it because I hadn't been socialised well? Were my parents to blame? What was going on here? Maybe if my parents had taken me to more after-school clubs, maybe then I would be better at socialising. So I also blamed my parents as well. And I started to feel really bad about myself. I began to feel, I was the only person in the world who was this crazy and this messed up. Like, what was going on? And as I became aware that other people did actually have feelings, I began to behave in a more appropriate way. I studied other people. Practice, as the saying, practice makes perfect. If you put a lot of effort into something, and if you're determined and motivated enough, you can pretty much acquire any skill. And I think it's the same with socialising. One analogy that comes to mind here is being a foreigner in another country. If you go to France and you spend a lot of time in that country and you're determined and motivated enough, over time you will probably become fairly fluent in speaking French. And you will also likely pick up some of the mannerisms of the French people. You'll pick up their culture. However, there will always be the awareness that you are a foreigner in a foreign country, and that when you speak French, it's quite conscious. Even if you get very, very fluent, it might become slightly less conscious over time. There will still be a lot more effort involved than speaking your native tongue, which is instinctive and intuitive, sort of hardwired almost. And I would say a similar process occurs when an autistic person tries to learn the language tries to learn neurotypicalese, the neurotypical language, the non-autistic language. If you put in enough, if you practice and try hard, over time, an autistic person can acquire some basic social skills, just like an English person in France might learn some French mannerisms. It involves the intellectual part of the brain, the conscious part of the brain, the part of the brain that learns any skill consciously. Whereas for most people, the neurotypical language is an instinctive thing that they don't need to think too hard about, they just do it instinctively because they've learnt it as children. It's sort of hardwired into their brains, whereas an autistic is not hardwired into their brains. They've had to learn it consciously. This takes a lot of time. Superficially, therefore, if you place an autistic person like myself, who spent a lot of time studying and learning how to speak the neurotypical language, alongside a native speaker, a neurotypical, and you're untrained, it might be quite hard to tell the difference between the autistic and the neurotypical. And so when an autistic person like myself tells the neurotypical that I'm autistic, the neurotypical might kind of, who's not educated, who doesn't really understand much about autism, might kind of say, "Oh, well, you must be mild." And that's because they don't really understand. They don't understand. There's nothing mild about this. They're confusing input and output, and appearances can be deceptive. The output of an autistic person and the output of a neurotypical person might not look too different, at least at first glance. But what is going on inside? What is going on inside in the brain of the neurotypical and the autistic person is very different. In my brain, even just doing this video, even just talking into this video, even although when I look at the video afterwards and play it back, I think I come across as relatively coherent. I think I come across as quite coherent, and I seem to present quite well. Hopefully, I'm saying. Obviously, I don't know how other people will view this video. I'm just saying it doesn't. I'm quite pleased with the output so far. But what's going on inside here is a lot of the cogs are turning. It's churning. Just getting the words out is effortful. Just putting words into a sentence is effortful. And yet the output might look okay. But people don't see what's going on inside. How effortful it is. It's like, just like someone speaking French, an English person speaking French, it might come across well, but inside the person is really having to work quite hard to put the words in the right order and to actually make sense. And this is what's happening in my brain. I'm aware of this all the time because it's so blooming exhausting. I mean, it's really, really hard work. It's just other people don't see this. They don't see what's going on. And that's why they might say I'm mild, because they don't understand. There's nothing mild about my condition. It's just that I've put a lot of effort into learning how to speak the neurotypical language. And I still, there's still many things I don't know and will never know, because however hard I learn, however much effort I put into it, is always intellectual and conscious. I don't have any instinctive connection to other people. I can't read people. Their thoughts and feelings completely elude me. I didn't even understand people had feelings until I was about 15, 16. And now I know people do have feelings, which is why, I try my hardest to behave appropriately and not to offend other people, because I've developed some basic empathy. I do have some level of empathy now, although I still struggle with empathy, and I'm aware of that fact. But I have developed some in comparison to, how I was as a child. And I do care about other people, and I don't want to upset them or things like that. So I do try really very hard to fit in and do the right things. But it's really hard work. And if I behaved inappropriately, if I didn't try, people would cast aspersions on my character. But when I do try, people tell me I'm mild. So whatever you do, people are going to judge you. People are going to, form ill-founded assumptions based upon ignorance, really, because they just don't get it. So I'm trying to explain here, really, the best I can, that it's really very, very hard work. socialising is really very difficult and tiring. I used to actually, as I gradually started to be able to have basic conversations with people, as I say, as a teenager, I just couldn't do small talk at all. Completely lacked the ability. And now I think I can do some level of small talk, and I'm quite pleased with myself on that level. I have learnt, for example, talking about the weather is always quite safe. Talking about TV is always quite safe. Asking people how they are is always quite safe. So I've learned, some rules about small talk. Still doesn't come naturally to me, but I play the part because I want to fit in. Just like an English person living in France might want to fit in, and you respect the culture, don't you? If you go to France, you respect the culture, so you try and do what a French person does. I'm trying to respect neurotypical culture as a minority. I feel like a foreigner. I'm trying to respect neurotypical culture because I'm a minority. And it's safe for a minority to try and fit in, isn't it? To avoid ridicule, to avoid bullying and harassment. Just like a foreigner in another country will try and play. Like if you went to Japan, for example, you take your shoes off when you enter a house. You're just respecting the civilization. You're respecting their culture. So I'm trying to respect neurotypicals by trying to do what's expected. But it's not natural. Just like an English person in Japan might find it very unnatural to take their shoes off, and they might sometimes forget. I sometimes might forget the social rules as well when I'm here. I might sometimes forget the social rules. I try not to forget, but it's very, very hard work, and people need to be aware of that. As I say, I used to pat myself on the back whenever I got through the day without making any major social faux pas, because I'm very, very aware of how much effort it's taken over the years to acquire these rules. So that's really what I want to say, really what I want to reiterate in this video. Okay, so thank you for listening, and I hope you've taken away, what I really hope you've taken away from this video really is to always look beyond surface, to look beyond appearances really, and to not take anything for granted, and to not assume that someone is to not assume anything. To always ask a person, because you don't know what's going on in here. You need to ask a person and not form assumptions, and that's how stereotypes get formed, when people form assumptions. Stereotypes are born out of ignorance and incomplete information.